Hej allihopa och välkommen till Pengaflödet-podcasten. Mitt namn är Emily.
Och mitt namn är Nanna.
Vi håller på med fastighetsinvesteringar i Storbritannien. Och den här podden kommer handla om just detta och vi kommer varje vecka ta upp relevanta ämnen och intervjua personer som vi finner inspirerande.
Hej och välkomna till Pengaflödet-podcasten. Idag har vi Catherine. Hello Catherine.
Hi there, Nana.
How is it?
All good, thank you. All good. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for being on. So today's Emily's doing some accounting work while I'm recording.
Good leverage.
Yeah, you're a Miss Leverage. You gotta tell
That's
us
it.
all about leverage today. So
That's it.
tell the listeners a bit about yourself, because you have a very interesting background and story.
Wow, thank you. So I never really know how to start this one. So yes, my name is Catherine Turner. I have a podcast called Leverage Lifestyle, which has just recently hit its 100 episodes, and we've been going for nearly 2 years now. And I've had the delight of now teaching other people how to share their message and their content and create lead generation through podcasts as well. So I love doing that. I'm also a mum and a wife. I'm mum to Ella and Milo. They are currently 2 and 1. So no rest for me at all. But I love it. And if anything, it's just given me new perspective. I have to leverage more in my life, and I have to also just create compromises as well, which I think is important, and creating that balance along the way. And yeah, throughout, I feel like throughout my whole life, I've wanted to have a business, be my own boss, as it were. Although I think that term can sometimes get misconstrued, because really your clients, your customers, your business partner, even your kids still, if you have them, will also be the boss of you, and you have to, you're working for them as well. So I think being your own boss is maybe a slightly the wrong thing to say, but being more in control of your circumstances, creating the income you want to, because you're at the helm of the business. I think that has been important to me for a very long time. I'm not quite sure even where it came from, but it's something, even since primary school, I was thinking of business ideas. Even when I was teaching people how to dance, I was doing it for someone else's school, but I was thinking, how do I create my own dance school and drama school? That was something I had in mind for a very long time. And then finally, it was when I was working in the public sector for the county council here in Essex in England, that I was on my work from home day, and I kind of put that in air quotes because I wasn't very good at working from home at the time. It was bad discipline. There was a training event, a 2-hour training event to go and learn what I didn't know was about, but it was essentially for women, which meant I dragged my mum along because she was a nurse at the time and she wanted something different. She just didn't know what that was going to be. And I kind of had that feeling for a long time of I wanted something different. I just didn't know what it was going to be. I'd got very comfortable working and earning a salary each month. And I went along. It ended up being about property. And since then, I have been in property. So that was, 2011, I went and got myself educated. And since September 2012, we've been in property. We started off with single let. We've done HMOs, houses of multiple occupation. We have done service accommodation. We've done flips where you buy, refurbish, and then we've sold it on. And right now, one of the main things we're working with is with some other partners on a business where we're sourcing properties to overseas investors. And that seems to be working really well because of the kind of current climate we're in right now, where maybe the pound's a little bit weaker for overseas investors to kind of jump into the UK market, whereas it might have been a little bit more expensive to do so before. And we are just managing that whole process for them. And that's quite fun. I say that's a relatively new development, what we've been doing, although we have sourced and done deal packaging in the past as well. So I feel like most property strategies we've dipped into, the next one to get onto will be to do some commercial conversions. We've always looked at some, but the numbers have never worked out quite right. But yeah, we've done a lot, and along that way, I've become a trainer and a speaker. Like I said, I've launched my podcast. I've launched other online businesses. We have a virtual assistant hiring business called the Viva Club. We have an online kind of resource website that you can go to, which is business-sos.com, where we just share a lot of the stuff that we've done, because we do think, why reinvent the wheel? This is all about leveraging knowledge, experience, the time we've put into it. And so that's kind of bringing it up to present day. So that's a bit of the background and kind of what we're up to now.
Wow. So all of these businesses that you mentioned, how long did it take for you to get all of them from start to, let's say, from property to all of the other businesses?
Wow. Okay. So some have come and gone in that time, and for varying reasons. So I think most businesses, I don't think I would have even have called them, say, a business. They would have been like, with the single let, we were letting out through a contractor to our local council to help people who were more disadvantaged. So we weren't really having to run that as much as a sort of business. All I was doing is but looking after the spreadsheets and sort of maintaining the property as when we needed to. So for me, it didn't feel like a business. That was just essentially being a landlord. And it was only when we started to look into HMOs, these house of multiple occupations. So we had multiple people living in one property. That's when I started to really see property as like a business, because I realized that all too quickly I was becoming essentially an agony aunt to these tenants. They were sharing all their problems with me. It was taking up more time just kind of dealing with their issues and their kind of the household stuff, rather than trying to build the business. And that was always my aim. So it was then I looked at employing someone. And I really think that's kind of when it takes it from just being like this, really just another your only employee. You've just become an employee again, but just to yourself, to really then becoming a business, because you're employing someone now. You have to think about your cash flow, your turnover, like, can you afford to bring someone else in? You've got to then manage them. You've got to create all these processes, because everything that was just in your head before, you've now got to share with someone else, and they've got to take over the running of the business from you. So I had an assistant who basically shadowed me for a while. He kind of took over a lot of the day-to-day operations of the business, so that I could start to grow the portfolio through finding investors, finding new properties. And so that probably happened, I want to say, within about 6 months of getting our first HMO. I could be slightly wrong, but that's how it feels like. But then he only stayed with us for about 6 months, because for him it was really a bit of a stepping stone, and while he was looking for sort of the job he wanted. And I think for many people, when they're stepping into a business that really is then like the manager and them, that's quite hard, because you're working for essentially a startup. And it means that you do need a little bit of a jack of all trades at the time. You need someone who's kind of willing to be like a bit of a mini you and take on a lot of different responsibilities. And for someone who loves variety and is quite creative and, enjoys that diversity in their work, like, that's probably really good. But for other people who are maybe very specialists in a certain skill area, or just want to be, have a standard kind of 9 to 5, it's not for them working in a kind of startup environment. Definitely not in property, because it's definitely not 9 to 5. So that can be difficult, kind of finding the people to work in your business that have a similar mindset to you, but you've also got to remember they're not you, it's not their business. And so you've got to be, what I quite like to do with the staff who we did start bringing in, is to be very flexible with them. So to say, look, you've got a 40-hour week salary, but you can work those 40 hours however you want. So if you need to be available, like you want your evenings, then okay, we can work that out. But it had to be, that's some of the stuff you have to learn along the way when you start as I say, going from essentially being someone who's self-employed and either working for yourself or maybe contracting out to someone else, to the difference of then building a business where you're bringing in people, you're creating processes, you've got to look at all the different areas of the business, or all the different areas, that make up a business, should I say, like sales, like marketing, like finance, like operations. That's when it becomes a business. So I think I started looking at it, and the main reason I would say is not necessarily because I was 100% business savvy, although I'd studied it at GCSE and A level, is more that I didn't want to keep doing the bits of the business that I didn't like. And that was kind of my first understanding of like leveraging and being able to scale up, because it wasn't just about me doing everything. I then was more strategic in how I did that. And I think that's happened in most of the businesses. It's usually been within about 6 months to a year that I figured I need to make this a business, not just about me running and doing absolutely everything in it, because it's therefore not scalable. I can't pass this on. This isn't a true business if it's just me running it, because if you take me away, the business doesn't run. And so that's, if you think you've got a business, but you take you away and it doesn't run, then you haven't really got a business. I think that's the thing I learned. So yeah, 6 to 12 months is kind of what it took. I think probably, like I said, it's just that mindset change of, I don't want to be doing everything, and I'm not the best person to be doing everything. That's the other thing as well. Like sometimes that's a hard lesson to learn. Like you're not necessarily the best person to do everything in the business, but you might be the blockage in the business. You might be the person who's, like, say, holding things up from scaling or from growing or from increasing the cash flow in the business, increasing the revenue, or you might be hindering the profits in the business even. So yeah, that's the kind of lessons I learned. So yeah, 6 to 12 months is what I would say.
So how did you stumble on to property?
So that was, like I said, well, there's a bit of a story behind it. So am I okay to go into the bit of the story behind it?
Yeah, of course. That's why we're here.
Great. So I, as I mentioned in my kind of background intro, was working for the local county council at the time. It was only meant to be a temporary kind of position, in the sense that I didn't want to be there. I knew this wasn't kind of my goal in life, to be sat behind a desk 9 to 5. And I'd kind of worked my way up, and I had been there then at that point 5 years. So that's not obviously very temporary. So I was walking home. I usually walked home with my husband. We both lived nearby. He was traveling and commuting into London at that time for his work. And we had a flat together behind the train station area, and my work I could walk to. So we usually walk back together. But in this particular instance, on this particular day, I got home before him. And the local paper had arrived, which I never usually read. It would usually go straight into the recycling. And instead I sat down and just turned the page open. And on that particular page was an advert, just a little kind of 6x4 advert. And like I mentioned, it's kind of this women in wealth type event, like 2 hours on a Tuesday at a local hotel, which again happened to be then on my working from home day. And I just tore it out. And again, so many times I could have torn out something that looked interesting and the date would have gone and I'd have forgotten all about it. But for some reason, I kind of kept this. I booked myself on the day. I called my mum, said for her, "You working that day?" She said, "No, I'm not." And I took her along. And like I said, I wasn't really even clear from the advert. I don't know what compelled me about this advert. It's like, I don't know, maybe it was the woman thing. Maybe it was maybe it was because it seemed a little bit mysterious, actually. I didn't really know what it was about. But it drew me in and I went along, and it was a 2-hour seminar about investing in property. And I remember at the end of it, there was an opportunity to sign up to do a 3-day course to educate yourself in property. And I just turned to my mum at the time and I said, "There's got to be something more." And so I went to the back of the room. I signed me and my mum up. It was probably the best part of a month's wage for me and my mum to go, which I put on a credit card. And that was kind of the start. And I think, as I mentioned, like I don't know where my want to have my own business kind of came from. I just remember it from a very, very young age. And like my mum had always been a nurse, but she'd had multiple jobs to kind of keep us going. As I'd grown up, she was a single mum. And so she'd had different jobs just to kind of keep us going. And I suppose I just had this real sense of responsibility that I kind of wanted to pay her back as well throughout this. And so when we went on the 3 days, it really just opened up my mind to lots of different property kind of strategies, you'd probably call them, like HMO, buy to let, all these things that I I'd always known property was obviously a good investment. I just didn't know people like me who did it. And when I say like me, like I say, I was brought up in a single parent family. I didn't know any business owners, any business. I think my mum reached out to a friend of hers that she kind of knew throughout. It wasn't like a really close friend, but she knew he was a landlord. And actually, he came around and spoke to us. And if anything, he nearly put us off doing property because he was this typical landlord who was doing everything himself. And so for him, it was just all the negative side of property, not the positive side and the kind of cash flow and the rewards you can get from it.
But was he educated, or was he just live and learn?
Yeah, I think he was a kind of live and learn type landlord. Yeah, I don't know if he'd just become maybe of an accidental landlord when he'd maybe sold a property and then, or, hadn't sold a property and then moved and just had started letting one out. So I think, yeah, he'd kind of done it as a, like you say, live and learn through that rather than getting that kind of education and learning the mistakes from other people, I think is, again, a good leverage skill. Rather than having to kind of go through all that pain yourself. And that's not to say we haven't gone through some challenges at all, far be it from that, but it definitely told us, okay, how do we want to do this? What type of properties do we need to get into? And that's kind of how my education started. So that was like, say, 2011, 2012, got our first buy-to-let set up. Our first buy-to-let was set up actually at the property my mum used to own. I've now bought it off her since, funnily enough. It then became our first service accommodation unit. And so, yeah, it all kind of started from there. And then, funnily enough, the way we grew our portfolio was actually we took the first house, me and my now husband, but back then we weren't married. We had bought a house together and we ended up selling that. We made a decent amount of money within about 18 months to 2 years of buying it. And we'd made a good kind of profit on it. And so we released that profit that we'd made on our purchase and started to put that into our first HMO and our first flip deal. So again, that's not for everyone. Like, we didn't have dependents then. I probably wouldn't have done that if I had kids, or it would have been maybe a bigger conversation. It seemed quite a simple and just the way to get started for us at that time, still in our 20s. And so, that's something I do share with people because I think, it's not for everyone, but if there's a way, if you don't feel like you've got a lot of cash or savings or things like that, sometimes I think it holds people back. It's like, I can't get into property, but there's so many different ways you can get started in property. And whether that's you take the property you're in right now and you leverage that and you can release some equity in it, or maybe you have to sell it and you downsize for a little while. There's so many different ways. Maybe you've got some good credit rating, you can get some money on credit cards. Again, I know that feels a bit risky for some people, but whatever it might be the way you want to get started, there's so many different ways, especially if you're not one of those people who has, say, money in the bank or savings, or you don't come from, your family don't have money right now. There's so many different ways you could get started.
Yes, that's so true. So you were mentioning about sourcing. Which area are you focused on? Is it nationwide, or is it south of England? Or
So we are connecting with other sources as well. This has been the great thing about building our network over this amount of time as well now. So obviously we've been connected to the world of property, and thanks through the education, building a network over 8 or so years. So we are sourcing ourselves where we live and sort of the counties that surround us. So London, we're based in Essex, but right next door to us is London. We've got Kent and we've got Suffolk above us. So we're kind of sourcing everywhere that we can get to within about a 2-hour radius. Mm-hmm. And then we have other sources based in other areas. So yeah, it is kind of nationwide for us at the moment. and it means we're one point of contact for the partners we're working with, who then they're the main contact for all these overseas investors, because they speak Cantonese, and a lot of these investors are based in China and Hong Kong and places like that. So yeah, they're a great, obviously it's a good partnership. That's, as I say, it's fairly new, but it's worked well because, as I say, we've sourced before, we've deal packaged before, we've now got a good network built up. We know how to do due diligence on properties. We've done it now for a long time. And so it's just kind of using all the skills and the network that we've built up. And I think, again, that's great use of leverage, right? You use your network, you use the skills that you've built up, and then you leverage to other people who can, you know, cover maybe areas that you can't personally get to. Or, as I say, in this case, we're being leveraged by these overseas investors because, you know, they can't come and literally view all these properties and go through the whole process themselves. So they're leveraging us. So it's there's lots of wins throughout here, because I think when you use your skills, when you build the network, when you're helping other sources elsewhere, you're helping people overseas, we've got then a good partnership going on. There's lots of wins that go throughout the whole line of this business. So that always feels good to me, like when lots of people can win out of it.
It's always about the win-win.
Exactly.
I like that. So how, because you like leveraging, as I think the listeners can tell, how can you trust the people that you're leveraging? Or do you trust them? Or how did that fare? You know, you were so used to doing it yourself.
Yeah, it's really interesting because as you kind of introduced me as Miss Leverage, and I think there's potentially a bit of misconception there that I've just been so used to leveraging and outsourcing and working with other people, but it does take time. It's like a kind of muscle that you've got to keep working out, and to let go of stuff that has always been in your control or that you've always been used to doing, and handing that over to someone else. There's sometimes fear there for people. Obviously, we work with business owners who are outsourcing to a virtual assistant, for example, for the first time through our Viva Club service. And, you know, they write to me and they're like, I'm really fearful about this. And, you know, how can I get through this? So there's lots of different ways. One, it's like I said, exercising that muscle and thinking, okay, am I the best person to do this job, or should I be outsourcing this? Could someone else do it better than me? Could even a software or a system do it better than me to start with? That's usually my husband's first port of call. Is there a piece of software or a system that can do it? And he loves all of that stuff. And for me, I love working then with people and seeing, okay, what's then like the next step we can take it to. So in terms of working with our virtual assistants, most of our virtual assistants are based in the Philippines. Obviously, they are then thousands and thousands of miles away. It's then, okay, you can use technology, things like time proof. You can have systems like LastPass in place to protect your work and your documents, have cloud-based systems like Google Drive and Dropbox and things like that can be used. So it means they haven't necessarily got access to absolutely everything, but they'll have encrypted or a certain access level. So that's a good way to work with outsourcers and kind of build up that trust over time. And I feel like whenever I talk about virtual assistants and any member of staff, whether they're kind of physically based and sat next to you, you've still got to build that trust up over time. You don't give people like your credit card details like 2 seconds after meeting them. I think it's all about building that over time, letting them show you that they're competent, that they're trustworthy over time anyway. And it's as part of the process whenever we're bringing new people in and we're outsourcing to them, it's giving them small little test tasks to try them out as part of the interview process and application process. And that starts that whole process of that building trust and how they work, and are they, you know, doing it to the same level of diligence that you would. So yeah, it's built over time. It's having good contracts in place, of course, things like that. I think for us, a lot of the time we have been used to doing things on a handshake, like a gentleman's agreement it's called. And sometimes we've been burnt by that, because I like to think we're very trusting and open people. but not everyone is. And one of the things I've learned in over these 8 years of doing business is like, as much as you might know that person inside out and you think you trust them inside out, like always have a contract there, always have your non-disclosure agreements in place. Just really be clear about expectations. That really helps. And like I said, being really clear from the outset, you know, what's the remuneration, what's their part of the deal, what you'll be doing. And I think that helps so often. The biggest thing for me in all of everything I've just said there, the overarching piece is communication, and really communicating how you're going to work together, expectations, building that trust. And it comes down to good communication at the end of the day.
That's true. That's true. And what about systems? I know you mentioned some systems, but maybe you have some more.
Yeah. So as I say, I had this joke, but it's true. So it makes it even funnier that the team, whenever they come up with a piece of software that has to be used. So Steve is great, my husband, also my business partner, who he loves a piece of software because basically his kind of role within any of our businesses has always been sat behind the laptop, tinkering away. His background is finance as well. He's a corporate finance manager by profession and corporate management accountant by profession, I should say. And he loves a piece of software. He loves entering numbers. He loves a spreadsheet. And so for him, if he can make something work with less human intervention, because obviously there's then always human error, that's like, he loves that. And so we've just been trialing Monday.com. It's a new piece of software we've just been trialing in terms of a CRM system. And also kind of it helps with task management. It can link in with your email systems. So he's been absolutely loving that recently. But as I say, that's a new one we've just been using.
Sorry for cutting you off, but is this better than Asana and all of them other?
So Asana, in terms of just comparing the two, Asana is like a task and project management tool.
Yeah.
But it's not a CRM system. So a customer relationship management.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
All that acronyms,
I mixed them together.
No, but we used to use Asana a lot of the time, and our CRM system really used to be our email management system, and we used to use just a simple MailChimp. Like, things don't have to be expensive when we talk about systems and software and things like that. And I think even Monday.com, it's a CRM. It's also a project and tool management as well. I think the version we're on is like £69 per month. So it's not, break the bank type money.
No.
I would definitely recommend to anyone who is building their business and wants to keep an eye on their finances and cash flow to have some sort of cloud-based accounting software. We use Xero with an X, so Xero. So the process we go through is like, Steve will find it. The team are then kind of brought in to kind of check it and trial it. And then the final part of the process is like, can Catherine use it? Like, that's always the sign off point, because it has to be user friendly, right? It has to be something that I'm actually going to use. So like, for example, I mentioned Xero. You can have an app on your phone. It means that any receipts I get in for the business, I can just take a picture of straight away. I can file it. Like, it's so simple, like I said, it really user friendly, and it means I don't have to keep all these bits of paper that used to clog up my bag and purse all the time. And so that's why I say, if ever I mention a piece of software, you can kind of know it's gone through. I wouldn't say I'm a technophobe. Like, I try my best with things, but I'm not the best with it. So I think for anyone who then is a bit more technophobe, or thinking, is this a good piece of software for me to use? I'm not a fay with all this stuff. Like, I'm that kind of that test point for you and for people like you to go, okay, well, if Catherine can use it, I should be fine. Like, that's how I feel.
And you mentioned that you have a lot of or you have online businesses. Could you tell me some of them?
Yeah, so we did at one point, we had an Amazon-based e-commerce business, and that was based over in the US. And as I mentioned, again, in the beginning, when kind of having children, a few things had to get compromised, or there were some compromises had to be made. So we decided to once the products had finished or we sold them on, we then came out of that business with with all intentions to start the e-commerce business over in the UK after I had Ella, but then I had Milo very soon after. So that's still a little bit on hold, but I am a big believer in, well, especially as we've kind of seen right now as we're recording this, so much, retail stores here in the UK are still closed. So it is a point that, people are doing a lot more online shopping. But for me, in terms of the business we have right now, we have a Life Leverage online masterclass. So we have an online course. And again, I think that's an area there's massive growth in it. People wanting to learn in their own time, their own way, that you can access from all over the globe, that you can do the course while you're sitting in bed or at the kitchen table, like it doesn't matter. Like that's a real way that it makes education open to all. And I'm a real big fan of that. That's why I'm a real big fan of podcasts and so pleased to be on your podcast here.
Thank
and
you.
It just, it's great to get your message out there and share your knowledge in a way that's accessible. We also have the Viva Club, which stands for the Very Important Virtual Assistant Club. I have to give credit where credit's due to my husband on that, on the Viva. And that helps business owners and, solopreneurs, self-employed people, go and hire a virtual assistant in the Philippines, because we went through that process. There wasn't a lot of help and support at the time. We had to create all these documents that went alongside it, like these contracts of engagement, all the application forms, interview questions. We had to come up with all that. So you can now leverage us and take all that stuff that took us years and time and effort to build, and you can go and access that straight away through the Viva Club. And we also have business-sos.com, and that we started a little while back, but we didn't market it very well. And that, we also realize our limitations and our weaknesses. And so for us, we pulled it back off the market again. And it was at the start of lockdown, and we saw a lot of business owners, especially here in the UK, but all over the globe, really struggling with their business, needing access to tools and resources that either they were going to have to pay a lot of money for, or they just didn't know where to go. And so we launched business-SOS. So SOS actually stands for Systemize, Outsource and Scale. But of course, it has also the connotation of it's saving us, right? It's SOS, putting a call out for an SOS. So business-sos.com is to help businesses. They don't have to be failing, but maybe they're going through some struggles, or they just need access to some good tools that can help them systemize, outsource and scale. And so that's there. We've put a huge amount of our resource and tools on there absolutely for free that would usually have a cost attached to them. I don't know how much longer we're going to keep doing that for, because obviously,
I was quick.
Cost to us.
I saw it in your Facebook group that you were releasing it, so I went directly into your website to just download everything. I went, whoa,
cool. Well, this is it.
It's so generous of you, Catherine.
Oh well, no, I feel like it's our pleasure, and like as I say, it's not to say that some of our businesses and what we've been doing along the way. Like I deliver training in person as well, and I do face-to-face delivery stuff. And of course, that's all been stopped. So, like we were feeling it too, but we also felt that we could help. And so I always feel like if you can help, you should. So that's how I felt about that. And we've been getting some great feedback on it. I think we probably need to let more people know it's out there and spread the word a little bit more. So thank you for letting me share that on this podcast.
No worries. You're allowed to share it. But I was wondering about the Amazon. So how long were you doing it, and what type of stuff were you selling? Because a lot of people like to do e-commerce, and it's quite difficult for them to start, because it seems like everyone have the same stuff on Amazon, so the profit margins ain't so big. But you have done it, so maybe you can explain it.
Yeah, happy to. So, oh my goodness, trying to again get my timeline right. So it's around 2013-14. I learnt about the Amazon e-commerce business side of things. So it's obviously after I started in property, and essentially I was looking at as a tool to create some deposit pots, to create another stream of income, to have these kind of multiple streams of income and not just rely on property or rely on our salaries. Steve was still working at the time then. And I wanted something that, like, I love property and it's great, but you are at the whim of like sellers, of estate agents, and there's lots and lots of moving pieces within property. And that's why, you know, people get to leverage us now as these overseas investors, because there's so many moving parts to it. But with Amazon and the e-commerce, like, I felt like it was very step by step, and that I quite like that. I like lists. I like tick off one part and you do the next part. Like, that seemed to suit my personality very well. And so I just thought, okay, let's give this a go. Like, Steve was a little bit skeptical because at this point property we hadn't invested in our HMOs. At that point we were really just still getting started, I suppose, in property. We were taking our time and finding our feet. So he was a bit like, well, you've already invested in this. Is it worth investing in something else? But for me, like I said, it just diversified our risk. We put into our first product about £1,500, so £1,500 into our first inventory. And we also, that kind of covered, we put any marketing budget that we were spending on Amazon ads on a credit card. And again, we kept it very low just so we could kind of test this, because my feeling at the time was, okay, could I live, and would it be earth shattering to me if I lost this £1,500, like if it didn't work? And so for me, whenever I go into a business, like, ideally, if it has a lower point of entry, as in, like, I'm not going to have to sell my house off the back of it because I've lost everything, sort of thing. Like, how can I get in relatively small, test this out and give it a go? And like I said, I was starting this 2013-14, and I do think Amazon has changed a lot in that time. And probably products we started with would not be a good one to do now, because it's changed a lot. But the principles are similar, but I would add some additional ones from how I started. So the principles are obviously try and buy low and sell high, like simple rules of selling e-commerce and trading, right? You buy low, you sell high. But within that, I always think there's a point where you need to ensure you're still getting good quality, because that will trump anything. You know, as soon as someone finds that you've got a bad quality product, say if you've bought too low and you're trying to sell it for too high, people will call you out on that. So you've still got to feel to your end consumer that you're giving them good value. They're still going to be happy with that. Being able to market something well, and I was talking about this, someone just literally a couple of days ago, was the fact that if you believe in your product, like it's something you would actually buy yourself, you can get behind it so much better than something that's just based on numbers. And I think a lot of people, again, when they're doing Amazon business, they're trying to like calculate the numbers to the nth degree. They've got analysis paralysis. But actually, if you use something you would use and get behind, you can market it, you can kind of position it differently to your competitors. And I think that really helps. And then finally, the additional caveats I would put on from when I learned is like, it's going to find a niche within a niche, like really honing something. And like I said, if you then know about this product, something you would use yourself, then, or it's within a niche that you particularly know. So for example, I'm vegan. So I would then go more down the route of something that's then like vegan friendly, cruelty free. It would have to have like sustainability and ethical, like kind of stance to it. And so for me, I'm going to like go down another like level of what it has to be before I'm all in on something. And I think that's something that speaks to you. Like I said, something you would buy, something that you can really get behind. That's going to make a hell of a lot of difference to any e-commerce business, whether you're using Amazon or Shopify or any of these other platforms now. If you can really get behind it, that's going to really help your business fly. So that's the big difference. Probably from when I started, you probably could have done anything. We started with measuring spoons. Like I've still got 2 sets of them in my drawer at home here. I still make cakes with them and everything. And like I wasn't necessarily a big baker then. We did it because the numbers worked. It was small and light. It hit a lot of the good criteria that we wanted at the time. and it wasn't a cash cow. It wasn't a wow product, but it made us money back. So we hit the whenever I used to deliver training on this, there was a kind of a slide I would show, and you would put 25% of your 100%. So your 100% is the price of the product it's going to sell for at the end. So 25%. So say you're selling something for $20. We'll talk in dollars because we sell in the US. $5 of that, so 25% would be covering the cost of the product and shipping it to Amazon or wherever your warehouse is going to be. We used Amazon because it's great leverage. 25% is going to be your Amazon fees and commission and all of that. That's kind of roughly how it worked out. 25% was going to be your up to marketing spend. So again, you might not spend all your $5 on that in terms of each unit you're selling. And then the final $25 is your profit margin, essentially. And that's how I'd always work on it. And for us, the measuring spoons, they fit that completely. They were technically, I think they worked out at like $3 each. We got 500 of them. And that included shipping from China to the US. So, yeah, and we didn't have to put a lot behind marketing. We would do little promos on it every now and again. And yeah, it worked, but I would definitely not tell anyone to do measuring spoons now. Like it would be completely saturated. But so this is where I say like finding a niche within a niche, and doing something that you really can get behind. And actually you don't have to do something like, if you can hit that even 20%, but it's a kind of regular sale, then that's still good. Like normally you'd have to get 25% or above. But nowadays, even 20%, that's still a very decent margin. If you can leverage most of the other stuff out, because if it's not really a lot of your time taken up, then hey, keep making 20% profit margins on everything. That's decent, right? That you'll make some decent cash flow off that.
Yeah.
So.
It's all about cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your favorite business? Because you have several businesses, as you have mentioned. Is it speaking, or is it the Viva Club, or property, or online business? You have so much.
That's like trying to choose your favorite child. Like that's not fair. Because a lot of them are like my babies, because when you start them up, and like I said, some have come and gone in that time for varying reasons, but I love property, the longevity of property and investing in property. Like there's like obviously a very English saying of "Now as safe as houses." Like there's nothing as safe as houses, basically, because it's this kind of bricks and mortar. It's physically there. It's gonna, for me, I love the kind of the final part is it's housing a family. It's becoming someone's home. Like that's the great part about what we're doing. Like whoever we're working with, whoever's investing in it, the final end part is that it becomes someone's home. So, and that's important, right? Keeping a roof over someone else's head. So I love it from that sense. I love the Viva Club because I can talk about it a lot. We've done a lot of the processes and systems all behind it. And now we have a VA who basically runs the whole thing for us. She works on a commission basis of each sale that's made. And I'm not really involved at all, apart from telling your listeners that it exists. And so that's lovely, because that's brilliant leverage in that sense. And there's definitely, I love the speaking. It's not the best leverage in terms of speaking. Obviously, having an online course and speaking on that is a great leverage. But when I'm doing my face-to-face delivery, there's something that I get from speaking that I can't get from any other business. And that's that kind of personal interaction, that immediate reaction, that being able to, like, when I say change people's lives, like that seems too much. Like, I don't know, maybe I have changed people's lives, maybe I haven't. The biggest thing for me is like, I've at least given them some knowledge and some experience that they didn't have before. However they choose to use that is of course up to them. But I have had people tell me it has changed their life. So
I saw you on 10X, right? Was that the biggest audience you've ever spoken to?
It's not actually.
Oh.
Yeah. So, well, you could argue my podcast is the biggest audience I've ever spoken to because obviously the amount of people it can reach across the world. But in terms of face-to-face, I've actually done, the numbers vary. People tell me there was 3,000 people there. Someone's told me there was 4,000 people there. So I go with the lower number. I say around 3,000 people. This was in the UK. Look, there's massive events that happen definitely in the US and places like that all the time. But in UK, events for like 3,000 people for entrepreneurs essentially just are so rare. And I was the second ever female to speak at it. I was the youngest speaker by probably a decade or so. Like, I don't want to disrespect any of the other speakers, but I think I'm okay to say that. I think that would be true. So for me, that was a massive experience. I loved it. I had such like the butterflies in the stomach were real. But as soon as I had my walk-on music and I got out there onto this stage, and as I say, the stage was huge and like, you know, the lights were blinding, but it felt like I owned that stage, and that was just incredible. My mum was in the front row along with my husband. Like, that was amazing. And yeah, it's just a fantastic experience. And it's so funny because now the amount of people who know me, and they'll be like, oh, where do I know you from? And so I usually start with that particular event that I did, just because it was obviously such a big one in terms of the UK audience. They're like, yeah. Or obviously now in this case, like the 10X one. But I think that's about 1,500 people there.
Yeah,
so
it was 1,500.
It was a decent number.
But for me, if I was going on stage with 1,500, I would be quite scared.
It was weird, like, yeah, I think like I always am in some ways, but butterflies for me, especially as a speaker, it for me, I make that mean that I care and that I'm excited and that it's just my preparation, because I know as soon as I get on stage, they go, and like I'm ready to rock and roll.
Yeah. So I don't know if you mentioned your portfolio, did you? In terms of our property? Yeah, in terms of property.
Yeah, so to be fair, our portfolio has kind of gone up and down throughout the 8 years. And we've always kept one property that we owned, and we've always kept that throughout the 8 years. It's the one we started with, and it's the one we still have now. But throughout that time, we have bought and sold, we've deal packaged, we've flipped, we've rent to rent. So we've rented off the landlord, and then in our case, we did it to service accommodation. And so we've not actually, and this is probably my one big regret over this 8 years, is we've not kept more in our own portfolio. So that's been, and it's so funny with everything that's happened in this year of 2020, like who could have predicted, right? Like just the craziest of years. And hey, it's one we'll all remember, right?
Yeah.
And so it was always our intention that this year, as we grow this new sourcing business, Steve's got a couple of other business propositions in the pipeline, but a lot of them have they're pipelined at the moment, in the sense that, you know, they're not, they've been delayed because of everything that's going on this right now as we record this. So our biggest thing has been like, okay, how can we buy more and keep within our own portfolio? So that's kind of our next step within all of this. And it's really hard. So many people have told us, like, you know, buy property and hold it and keep it. But at the time, it's been the right point for us to either do the rent to rent, or to do or to sell on a property that we've added value to. And we're actually in the process of selling a flip at the moment, because it doesn't make sense in terms of the gearing to keep it. Like, the cash flow wouldn't be enough to make it sense to keep it. So you could argue, like, you know, you should try and keep all properties that you buy, but some just it doesn't make financial sense to keep. So that's probably my biggest regret in terms of property, and that we haven't kept building our portfolio whilst we've been doing other strategies. And that's definitely something we're going to remedy. I'd like to say this year. It might now move into 2021, but that's cool. We can live with that.
Yeah, we don't know what would happen with the world. It's strange.
Yeah,
No one could.
indeed.
The only one who could predict it was Bill Gates.
Well, this is it. I know. So, yeah, I feel like everyone's going to be watching him a little bit closer now. Hey, right? It's like, what is this guy? Well, and the other one, wasn't it Simpsons or something? The Simpsons has had a lot of predictions. Like, crazy, right?
Yeah. So, which business, if I may ask, have affected you most during this COVID time?
Oh, okay. So, in terms of, so the Viva Club has kept going. I suppose one of the things we've noticed with it, we haven't had as many people buying at the moment, and maybe people are just being a little bit more conservative with their cash flow and what they're spending out on. But I think as more people are, maybe their new normal comes to working from home and not from offices and things like that, I think people will be more inclined to work with virtual assistants. So I do see that as a business that's going to keep growing, and it's a business that, as I say, because it's a commission only to our employee within that, and I don't have to do a lot else, it still keeps ticking along very nicely. Obviously my speaking directly and face to face and doing live training, that's completely gone at the moment. So we're about to trial at the end of this month, so we're in June now, a way of delivering it as would normally be the kind of 3 days that I do in terms of the podcast training. We're looking at how I deliver that through some sort of live stream. So rather than it being an online course that's pre-recorded and has got modules, and I'm essentially just delivering my 3 days that I would normally do through the power of the internet, which is pretty cool in the sense that it then gives scope to go global, to have that same level of audience interaction. And that's the bit we've got to test. Like, can I interact with an audience the same way through, and we need to check what systems are going to work nicely. Will it be Zoom? Will it be another type of live streaming software? So that's, as I say, I freelance for Progressive to do that. So we're just trying to put that together. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. What else have we been doing? I say the Business SOS, a lot of that's all free resources. So that's been kind of cool, but obviously it's not necessarily bringing an income in. So I suppose it's how you mean, like, is it about income? Is it about transactions?
Yeah, I mean, income wise.
Yeah. So I suppose really now this new biggest source of income is going to be the sourcing for overseas investors, because they're taking advantage of an opportunity right now, and I think that's what business is about a lot. You see an opportunity and you go with it, right?
Yeah.
And so we see an opportunity right now to work with these investors, and all the stats are showing right now, of course, that yes, people are going to be affected in terms of maybe they can't afford their mortgages anymore, but they're still going to need a roof over their head. So renting is absolutely going through the roof, as you kind of expect. And so for me, we're looking at properties that are essentially going to be tenanted anyway, like they're tenanted they're either already tenanted, so we can bring them up to a better specification for the tenants that are already there, or they're going to have new tenants in them. So for me, that's important, that it's about how can we make it affordable, create some good housing. So for us, that's where there's some massive growth in terms of kind of it's as I say, a relatively new revenue stream for us. So that's business that's kind of taking off because of these overseas investors looking at this new opportunity over here in the UK. And like I said, for the delivery, the online training, where that has impacted my income, I haven't been able to do some of the face-to-face delivery that I would have done throughout this time. I would have delivered at least 2 training in this time. It's now like, okay, how can we deliver this in a new way that still gives the participants, the clients, the soon-to-be new podcast hosts a way to learn, but it's it still keeps that level of interactivity, the bit that people love from face-to-face learning. That's going to be the new challenge, right? But if we can overcome that challenge and learn from it, then it gives us even more scope to deliver that training to people who would never have been able to come to the face-to-face training because, say, they live in Sweden, for example. So yeah, that'll be exciting.
Yeah, it seems like you have some interesting stuff going on moving forward. Hopefully this COVID will stop soon.
Indeed. Or at least, as I say, I think it's interesting. People like just kind of see a lot of the news I get nowadays seems to be from my Facebook and social media feeds. But I think as people there's going to be this, what people are calling a new normal, working from home, social distancing, there's not going to be these, probably I won't get to do a 3,000 person event for a few more years until maybe there's some sort of vaccine or better testing or things like that. So how can we still reach that level of people, or maybe even more? It's quite interesting. Just to give you an example, Steve, my husband, was on a online auction yesterday for a couple of properties he'd viewed. The numbers went crazy because they'd set it up more like an eBay style, where it's essentially the bidding is open now for like 4 hours. So where you used to do the face-to-face auctions and a lot would come up, you'd have the lot, it would be done in less than 5 minutes. But now you've got people who could be bidding for like 4 hours straight and see this price go up, and the prices went, all the due diligence he's done, all his lovely spreadsheets, all the prices went way over it. So look, like
he was like waste of time.
Well, yeah, there's an element of that, but also it's great learning, just seeing kind of what's happening. But of course, if those are first time buyers or goodness knows, I'm sure some people did overpay.
So do you think that the online auction is like dead now for investors?
Well, it'll be the interesting thing to see, because I think this is one of the first like big ones that's been set up in this style. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see if this level of overpaying will keep up. I mean, we're working with criteria where we need at least 8% yield and things like that. So obviously someone who's buying as maybe a builder even, who's doing the work themselves, or as a first-time buyer, they're not having to factor that in. So it will be interesting to see if that trend continues, or if it's a kind of that kind of rush to market. It's that new thing, a new way of buying, and then people will kind of realize that, I overbought, or I overspent, or I got caught up in the bidding process, and it'll be interesting to see if this continues. So I think only time will tell on that one. I think we need to see how many others keep kind of going over the price than what we expected, because otherwise, as you say, it'll be interesting times for investors, right? You'll have to think outside the box. Maybe auctions won't be the best place to go to for property deals. You're gonna have to find another way.
Yeah, that's true. So I have a question about service accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of people here in Sweden who's doing it in UK.
Okay.
How can you scale it? Because you're a perfect example of leveraging. So I bet that you maybe have some tips on how you can scale your essay business.
Mm-hmm. I do, yeah. No, it's quite interesting. If I would recommend your listeners do go and listen to my podcast if they're interested at all, because I've shared some of the highs, but also the lows of going through that scaling process. One of the things we did to try and scale our business, and we took our time with this, we started there very slow with our essay business. We started that in 2015, and we started off small. I think we only took on about 3 to start with, because we wanted to test it in towns and cities that didn't really have essay at that point. Our first essay is now in our home city of Chelmsford in Essex, And I'm happy to say that because we now don't have any SAs here, because over that time, literally even over 5 years, so many people jumped in, and where we used to be the only SA and the only SA operator in the city, we then became one of many. And so for me, kind of the same with the e-commerce and Amazon and the changes that happen there. One of the biggest things is keeping up with what is happening on the ground. And sometimes that can be harder, I appreciate, for overseas investors. So working with a sourcer or an agent that is going to tell you how it is, and not sugarcoat, not over egg the prices, not try and give you
flashy spreadsheets.
Oh, geez, it's so interesting. So as we were scaling, we were taking on more, we were looking at deals, people were sending us deals. The amount of people who just possibly didn't even know how to work a spreadsheet properly. That was interesting because my husband, I call him the spreadsheet king. He would be looking at them and he'd say, okay, but as you increase the occupancy each night, other costs also increase. So for example, your linen costs are going to increase, your cleaning costs are going to increase, but people, when they were sending over these spreadsheets for maybe deals that we were looking at, they hadn't factored that in. So I think that's one of the things that if you can understand like how to read spreadsheets, how to do your due diligence yourself, even from afar, and be able to question some of these things will help you not get into deals that have been a little bit, maybe they've put a flashy number on it, they're expecting X amount occupancy, but they've got no data for that. Because one of the things we were always clear on is like, we would get into an area first, we would get that data, and then if investors were coming to work with us and we were sourcing SA deals for them, is that we could show them the actual data of the occupancy levels, of how many bookings we'd had to turn away because we didn't have a second property or a third property in that area. And so that's how we built, is that we were getting inundated with bookings that we couldn't fulfill because we didn't have a second property. So then we knew we had to get a second property in that area. Does that make sense? So it's like we wanted to be oversubscribed before we ever considered taking another one in that area. And it's interesting because we took that approach, we did it for so long, and then we started to look at other people who were growing and maybe growing quicker than us. Maybe they were taking on block deals, and we were like, okay, so the next thing to do is take on block deals. And what we didn't do, and this is some learning as I'm even talking this through with you, like I'm learning the lessons myself and really kind of hoping this will help your listeners as well.
I think so.
Is that you can get so caught up in trying to match and scale and keep up with the Joneses and see other people, getting ahead of you, that you forget your own core principles of being oversubscribed, taking it slowly, one apartment at a time. And we started to look at these block deals, and we had 4 block deals in front of us, and all of them failed for different reasons. And that cost our business hugely. And it was a huge learning lesson for us. So probably my biggest lesson I could share with people is don't try and scale too quickly. Get oversubscribed. If you're not in the country or not in the area that you're investing in, you've got to work with someone who's going to tell you how it is. And interestingly, we had people come back and use our management service where Steve maybe had been very conservative in his figures, had not over-egged the figures, had sort of said, look, this is what we expect, but even at this percentage, like, you still be making, maybe 500. And they're like, well, someone else has told me I can make 1,000. He's like, well, okay, go with them then. That's not a problem. They then came back to us a year later and they were like, you were so right. Like, they did it all wrong. They were too far away. They didn't know the local market. And so they then were managed by us because, yeah, maybe we didn't get them as much, but we were more consistent. We told them exactly how it was. We knew the market better. Their property wasn't empty. It's all of that sort of stuff. So I think be cautious about someone who oversells it, and get advice from a few different people, because I've just seen so many people, very savvy investors, even local investors, who maybe have handed over their SA portfolio to someone, and they've still had their fingers burnt. So Yeah, I think we can all get caught up a little bit sometimes, just like maybe these online investors or these online people did on the online auction, get all too caught up in it, see these kind of figures, and it all gets a bit too exciting. And I think one of the things we could do, like I said, with the e-commerce and Amazon thing, is that, like, how can we keep learning? How are things changing? How are things adapting? How do we need to do something in the new state of things? And look, I think it could be a very good time for SA operators right now, interestingly enough, even though many were very fearful with COVID coming out. Because look, there's a lot of people now back at work. Construction sites were still operating, like outdoor construction sites were still operating, but hotels are shut.
Yeah.
So there's a great opportunity right now, but still be very careful. There's a lot to it.
Yeah.
And my biggest thing for any overseas investors is to work with people that you can build a relationship with, trust that they're, as I say, not over promising, and that maybe they're being a little bit more conservative, because I would trust that more.
Yeah, and I'm always wondering, because when we had our essay, we couldn't go onto these sites like Home Away. I think you need to have like 5 houses or apartments, properties to reach them. How much of an impact do you think being on those sites or just being on Booking and Airbnb and direct booking, does it affect or it doesn't?
Yeah, so interestingly, again, this is how the market changes over time. When we started in an area, we got on with an agent with just one property because they needed properties within the location we were, because they didn't have them on their books. But now 5 years later, you wouldn't be able to get on their books unless you had 5 or more. So this is quite interesting, right? So one of the things we did as part of our SA management company was we would take them into our portfolio, people who maybe just had 1 or 2, but it then meant they could get on the wider agency lists because of that. The biggest sites are Booking.com and Airbnb. They are, but don't rely on them. Like, you have to go with direct bookings as well, or build up your list of direct bookings. And some of that, even with direct bookings, I'm still talking about like working with some of the agencies, so like Silverdor, Situ. But again, we still had issues with some of these what were considered big agencies, and they weren't paying on time. So that's a big factor when you can literally get direct, and I mean direct, that, you know, they're paying into your bank account or through your payment system. You can take a deposit, you can take money in advance. That's so important for your cash flow, because Booking.com, you're getting paid after the fact. Airbnb, you're getting paid after they've moved in. Agencies, you're getting usually a 30-day payment terms. Like, that's not great for cash flow. It's really not.
No,
so
that's true.
Direct bookings are so important and vital to the SA business. And you can turn Booking.com and Airbnb business into direct bookings if you treat them well, if you go through a good process with them, if you have that built into your processes about building up the contact information, if you can give them discounts for coming back directly to you, and really just finding out like why they're there. What, you know, are they staying because they're contractors and they're working on a particular site? Are they going to be coming back a bit later? All of this, that really started my direct bookings, actually, when I took what was going to be our longest direct booking when we first opened was through Airbnb initially, was going to be for 6 weeks. And they were working at the local theatre doing the pantomime over Christmas time. And because of my background in dance and drama, I just thought, do you know what? I'm going to check and see if I know anyone connected through Facebook. This is the great thing about social media. This is one of the great things that you can do, obviously, with social media. And I found a mutual connection of this guy. And so he was trying to book. He was the technical crew. And so we started a conversation, and I got hold of him through Facebook, and then he booked direct. And he had a very tight budget because they were the technical crew. They'd been given a daily budget for their food and housing allowance. And so we created a good deal that I wouldn't have been able to do through Airbnb, because with the additional fees that that Airbnb charged us and that they charged the guests, the deal wouldn't have worked if we didn't do the deal direct. So that was the great thing, that about that. And then he became a great contact. So even though he didn't work on the technical crew each year for the pantomime, it meant that we knew for 6 weeks over the Christmas period, which can sometimes be a slow period, we always had people in at our big SA. So that was cool.
Yeah, that's really good tip.
There you go.
What else should we as international investors think about that you can give us? Not just about SA, in general.
In general. So I think it's about knowing the criteria you're looking for. Now, interestingly, overseas investors we're looking for at the moment, their main criteria, so it could be anywhere in the country, and this is where we're now working with other outsourcers, is that they want an 8% yield. So they're kind of looking at like a bank account, right? So that's how I look at property as well. Like what you're putting in compared to what you're getting out. And if it's better than what you're getting in the bank, and most of the time it will be, then you're doing well. So they're looking for 8%, for example, at the moment. And that's an 8% yield. And then they're looking for freehold properties. So they don't want leasehold properties. That's their general criteria, and that's about it. So it could be a HMO, a buy-to-let, anything. So from that point of view, that really helps us in terms of sourcing, because we've got this kind of carte blanche to look at quite a lot. But there's still that little bit of the box we're looking within. And you could, it could go either way from that point of view. But I think if overseas investors are really clear about what they want and then what they don't want, that they communicate that really well. And I think the biggest thing for us is having investors that are ready to go. So, being ready with deposits, being ready to sign paperwork and things like that, because the property market, even at the moment, is still moving pretty fast, as we kind of saw with these auction properties.
Yeah.
So it's still having to move pretty fast. So if you're an overseas investor and you want to jump in, like you've got to then be ready. Like if a deal matches your criteria, don't be slow about it. That's probably a big lesson. So I would also just kind of get a feel for what the sources or the people you're working with have done before, who they've worked with before. Share with them your criteria and then get them to kind of talk it back with you and give, maybe even just start with some example deals to start with before it's actually like, right, we're going to go for it. And because what you don't want to do is waste the source's time as well, because we've had that before. And that could be quite hard that, we're trying to get a deal done. The investors then suddenly like, oh, I was still just checking. Like, I'm still not sure, like I'm not quite ready to go. And so, yeah, that's really important, that just be clear what stage of the buying process you're at. Like, are you still just curious and you're checking the market, or are you like, nope, I'm ready to buy? Because that's going to help the sourcer kind of get the best deal for you and just be able to kind of work on the same page. I think that's the most important thing of anything. I think I talked about communication with your team and your virtual assistants, and I think communication is so key when you're working overseas, and like you say, when there is that kind of that physical distance between you, being able to have that good line of communication, understand like what your working hours are as well, just simple things like that, right? If you're based abroad and you're on a different geographic timeline, like if you're in bed but someone else is still working, like it's just being really clear on stuff like that as well.
Yeah. When you mention yield, do you mean gross yield or net yield?
So in this case, it's gross yield.
Gross.
Yeah. I mean, this is the good thing about, like I said, having a business partner who loves a spreadsheet, and he just, it's quite funny. My mum always calls him like a calculator brain, because she'd always say like he could calculate it quicker than you could type it into the calculator. So that really helps. Like I love numbers. I always used to love maths at school, but my husband's like another level. So I think that helps in the sense that it leverages our skills. Like I'm helping us connect with more sources because of my kind of background and network, and because my face is out there a little bit more, and my voice is out there a little bit more, so people do know me. And then Steve can do the due diligence and work through all the numbers and things like that.
Yeah. And tell me about being a businesswoman and running the business. How is it?
How is it? It depends on any given day, I suppose, or any given week. And the interesting thing for me is like as a businesswoman, and I suppose the other element to add in there is being a mum as well. I started this before I had kids, and then obviously since then I've had kids. I did have to take a step back when having kids, and that was kind of my choice. But I also think I wouldn't have been able to keep going to the same level I was, and feel like there's a lot of guilt at times being a mum and a business woman and a speaker who goes out and trains. And like I'm getting better at that, and I'm learning that it's good for me, and I think it's good for the kids to have that time away from each other at times, and to still be me, like still be Catherine Turner and not just mummy all the time. But as a businesswoman, it's interesting. I still think there's some barriers, and it's interesting some of the conversations we were having before we hit record. Still some barriers in place for females compared to males in business, for sure. Certain words that are maybe used to describe us that would never be used to describe a man. And maybe certain times when I'm overlooked at times, and someone might be talking with my husband about some part of the business, but really that's the bit of the business I do. So then I have to jump in, and they're like, oh right, oh sorry, like so yeah, there's some of that still.
That's so sad.
Yeah, it is. It's a shame. It still happens for sure. And again, it's that difference between, do I just get used to it, or do I try and do something about it? And so interestingly, because the first thing in property I got into was a Women in Wealth event. Before having the kids, and I need to start this up again, created a Women Building Wealth event. So just for women, which you could argue is like, oh, well, I had a lot of men having issues with that, saying if we created a male-only event, we get told off. And it's like, the trouble is most events are male-only. They just happen to be open to both female and male, but it's 80-20 male a lot of the time I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So for me, I just wanted to create a space for women to come to and just have that, I don't know, that safety aspect, the open aspect. Like it created a very different vibe, a very different energy. And we have a Facebook group that goes alongside that. And it's interesting because I've had chats with other female friends who are like, well, I think you should allow men into it. And do you know what? We had a man come to one of the events. He came along with his wife, and they came along with their daughter as well. And the daughter was, I think she wasn't even 10. We had some great laughs with him. Like, he loved it. And he thought, we loved that his daughter was there. And so we didn't say no, men can't come, because that wouldn't be right either. But we wanted to make sure that the women in the room felt there was just this cohesiveness, that there was a real love in the room. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but there was this real love energy, a real sense of understanding. And we do just face issues that men don't in business, and it was a safe space to talk about all of that. And that for me is what the Facebook group is about as well. Just being able to talk about issues that are specific to female businesswomen and entrepreneurs. And look, I love working with men. My business partners, my husband, crying out loud, say there's never anything about working with men. For me, it was actually a chance to bring more women into the space, so that when we do have these mixed rooms, it's not 80-20, it's nearer 50-50. Because look, if you look across the planet, there's actually, I think if you look at the statistics, I think it's about 51% female. So there's technically more women in the world, yet why in the room are not more women there? So yeah.
I definitely agree. There should be more women in business and in property as well. I really hope that there will be more of them.
Yeah.
Because I think when it's a mix of both genders and cultures, I think it's better. You get more out of it.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it's just this balance of perspectives, of just what are you going to bring to it? The diversity, like that's so important. It just brings different perspectives on it all, and the more people we can have around the table that don't look like each other, that are not the same gender, that we can have this whole collaborative approach. That for me is when magic happens.
Yes. So tell me about your walking music, your favorite movies, series, and book. I want to know about your walking music because you said you have a walking music.
Oh, okay. So my walking music, or to work to, or
no, I mean when you go on stage, your entrance music.
Oh, sorry, my walk on music. Sorry, sorry.
It's my English.
Don't worry. It's also Skype as well, right?
Yeah,
I'd be fine in face to face, and we'll have to get face to face when this is all over. That'll be
definitely.
So my walk on music is Katy Perry, Raw.
Okay.
Gets me all fired up, and it's like it's the Eye of the Tiger thing, but obviously like a kind of modern version of it, I suppose. And it just, it works. And maybe because her name's Catherine or Katie, I feel like a synergy. Cool. Yeah. So that's my walk on music. What else did you ask? Favorite books and series and film, was it?
Yep.
Okay. So one of the books I'm loving at the moment, and I keep dipping in back out of it, but I keep recommending it to a lot of people, is the Marie Kondo book, or the KonMari method of the life-changing magic of tidying. And again, I didn't think that tidying up or organizing could be life-changing, but it really is. And so I highly recommend it. It's also a series on Netflix as well that you can go and watch if you're not, maybe not so into books or whatever. I highly recommend it. Because I did an episode, funnily enough, before reading this book on Leveraged Lifestyle about having a kind of clear out, decluttering your personal and your business space. And because we've moved fairly recently, we are in a little bit of a state of clutter, but I'm also going through the KonMari method and process. So there will be some clutter before it all gets organized. So, but yeah, highly recommend that book. Oh my goodness. We are a bit of Netflix bingeaholics, I would say. So when it comes to like series and stuff, I love anything educational. I love anything that's true stories, especially when it comes to films as well. What have we loved recently in terms of Netflix series? How to Get Away with Murder. A great cast, love that. And always keeps you on the edge of your seat. But we're at the point where we're waiting for the next series to come. I also love Stranger Things as well. That was just really fun one. And movies. Like I said, I love a true story.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to share some of the recommendations I've been putting out there recently, just because, again, of what we've been going through, the movement obviously really coming apace again with the Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
So some of the ones I've been sharing are like Hidden Figures,
okay,
with Taraji P. Henderson, about the Black women involved in the space program. Just incredible and inspirational. And one of the documentaries I've recently been watching is 13th, again available on Netflix.
We saw that one as well.
Oh, everyone needs to watch that. I was heartbroken. Honestly, I'm still thinking about it now and I'm about to cry.
Emily got so mad.
Really, really has affected me. But that, and the other series, again, related to, again, what I think everyone needs to kind of hear and understand, is the When They See Us.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of 4-part, and it's Ava DuVernay as the director and writer, and she's an incredible Black woman. And she also directed Selma. And I think everyone needs to check out that. It's, again, so powerful. It's uncomfortable, but it's true. And that's why I think everyone needs to watch it.
Yeah. Yeah, good choices.
Thank you.
So tell me about your podcast for the listener of it before they go in and tune in for it, because people should do it.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for being a podcast Leverage Lifestyle listener. I call my listeners leveragers. I can check what they want to do, what they wanted to be called. And yeah, the podcast came about really because I just felt so many people getting into business. They were, had come from maybe working in as an employee and working a 40-hour week, and now they're working like 80-hour weeks, right? And understanding why you get into business. Most of the time, it's usually because you want more free time, you want financial freedom, but you also want location freedom and time freedom. And, time is finite. It's the only finite in the world. And how to get that lifestyle you want from the business. And look, there's no prescription to it. That's the biggest thing. I talk about the mindset, the skill set. I have interviews with people who are living a leveraged lifestyle. There's not one version of it. I think the biggest thing about it is we talk about freedom and choice and the opportunities that come when you create a leveraged lifestyle. And there's a lot in it. We say mindset is a big focus, but also going into the skill sets, talking about virtual assistants. I probably mentioned the word leverage so much, and if you're not quite sure what that means or how you apply it, the podcast is going to help you with that. And
definitely.
Yeah, come and have a listen. Like I said, maybe jump in on the 100th episode one that I just did recently. That might be a good starting point for new listeners.
Okay, and how can people reach out to you if they would like to get to know you or join your Facebook group or send you a message? Yeah,
I would love that. So Catherine Turner, Catherine with a C, and if you just put Catherine Turner Speaker on Facebook or LinkedIn, you'll find me. On Instagram and Twitter, it's Catherine Ann, A-N-N-T, so Catherine Ann T. I also have a website that's got links to all of those, catherineaturner.com.
Okay. There you have it, listeners.
There we go. This has been a pleasure. I love doing interviews, and it's so much fun. And you've made it a great experience. Thank you, Nana, for having me.
Thank you for being here on this podcast and taking your time. I know from your kids and everything, but this podcast episode gonna be amazing. So I hope you liked it. I surely did. So don't be stressed. Invest. Bye.